This is the one rust repair that I really haven't been looking forward to. It's in the roof, and you can see that it's rusted out right on the bottom edge here, just above the gutter line. And to get at it, you actually have to remove the gutter. Removing this gutter is nigh on impossible without destroying it, because of the way it's screwed in, and the screws are basically lock solid. You can't undo it. So I've cut a section of the gutter away. I'll then have to cut a section of the roof out, probably about that large, and weld a new section in. The problem is there's timber just in behind this, so I've got to be careful I don't actually burn the timber. And then I've got to reinstate the gutter. Now I'm lucky I have a piece of gutter off one of the other cars that I can cut and hopefully weld in, but welding these is going to be very, very difficult. I'll use the MIG welder, but it's going to be very touchy to get a good finish. So what I'll do next, I'll just cut the gutter away, looked at how much of this I'm going to have to remove, and then I'll cut the section out and then start fitting a new panel section into it. And as I say, I'll MIG weld that very, very carefully. Now I've cut the section of rust out of the roof. The original rust holes were those, so they were in a much smaller section of the roof than I've cut out. But what I've tried to do is to make sure I've got as much of the rust as I can out of this section. Now I can't see behind the rest of the roof line. There could well be surface rust, I'm sure there is, but to get that out I'd have to completely remove the wood, and that's just not an option. I've cut a new section. This section comes out of another vehicle, so it has the right profile, and what I'll be doing is using the MIG welder to tack that in place, and then gradually fill the weld up around. The problem you have with welding this is that there's a piece of timber behind in this section here, goes along the inside the roof line. I've put a piece of aluminium down in there to try and protect it as best I can from the heat so it doesn't catch fire. And I have to be very careful when I'm tacking this with the MIG to make sure I actually don't overheat the steel and then in turn burn the wood behind. So it's a very fiddly job, but at this stage I'll tack this in and see if I can get that in place without burning the vehicle. So I've managed to stitch the weld in. The little bit of problem on the bottom here, a little blow through, but other than that it's stitched all right. What I'll do now is to actually grind that back, and that'll clean up some of the bits of slag that I've got around them, and then I'll see the bits that I've actually got a tack weld in between the welds. At the moment it's a bit hard to see the bits that I've yet to tack up, but at this stage it's welded in quite nicely. There's no distortion there that I can feel, although when I grind it off it will be a lot easier to feel that. So at this stage I'll grind that off, finish the welding, and then flatten it out again, see how I go. The roof section's now been patched. I've welded that up, ground the welds off. It's not too bad. There's a little bit of a depression on this side, so I'm going to put a light skim of filler over the top of that. When I've done that and smoothed that down, then I'll have to put this section of gutter back in, or a new section of gutter back in. What I'll do with that This stage I'm thinking of using the oxy to just to weld the ends and then doing MIG underneath. So I'll see how I go. I think I can get it back in. Well, I hope I can get it back in. And but at this stage I'll put a little skim of filler in. The roof section I've repaired and I've filled the around the weld, so that's finished up quite well. What I've now got to do is to replace the gutter section that I cut out. Now I've cut another section out of one of my spare cars, and the idea is to try and tack weld that back in. Now I'm going to use a MIG to start with on most of it. If I have any trouble I might have to use some other means, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this up in position so it's held in place, and then I'll very carefully tack it in place. The problem I've got, of course, is that I've got to weld upside down, which is never the best thing in the world to do, but I'll see how I go. Welding the piece of gutter actually turned out to be quite successful. I didn't get any blowbacks. I had the MIG on very low amperage, so it took a long time to spot it in, but it's gone in, it hasn't distorted, and you know, I'm very pleased with that. I haven't screwed it up yet, which I will do. What I've got to do eventually is to reseal along the gutter, so I'll wait until I'm ready to do that before I finish it off, but at this stage it's all the repairs done. When you first examine any area that needs repair, all you tend to see is the worst bit, which is that there. But poking around, cleaning it up of course with a sanding disc, and then poking around with a scribe reveals a few other problems, like it's rusted up in here and it's rusted down into here and possibly even to there. So what I'll have to do is to cut a section out from here to there instead of just a little bit in the middle, and that will actually give a nice good piece of metal around the window frame. So what I'll do is I'll just measure up how much I'm going to cut, then cut the section out and make up a repair panel. Now I had originally intended just to cut the rusted section out from here to there, but what I found was that when I cut that out and started to weld the new piece in, it blew through here, and I noticed further there was a couple of rust holes starting to come through up here, so I eventually had to remove metal from here all the way up to there. So that's all new metal. Now I've welded it in place and I've just put a bit of filler over the weld. I haven't cleaned it up yet, but now that rust repair is complete. So that should, and unless I find something else, that should complete all of the rust repairs for the car. Now the only other problem I've found on the body once I've cleaned it up is that there is a crease along there. May not be able to see it in the video, but it's pushed up on a line along there as if a piece of timber has been forced upwards from the inside of the car, which may well have been. Now when I got this car, the body had been detached from the chassis, so maybe someone has tried to lift the body up by pushing up inside the car. I don't know, but anyway, that's got to be straightened out. I can panel beat that. It's not really a problem. What you're looking at here is the roof at the front of the car. I'm actually standing inside the window frame aperture, and I've mentioned before that I've had a crease across the top front of the roof here. Now what I've been doing, and a very noisy process, is to use a dolly and a slapping device here, and I've actually been hitting this down to flatten out the ridge line that was along here. You can actually see a black mark along there. Well, that's where the ridge is. Now I've got it down a fair way. It's a very, very noisy process, as you can imagine, when you bash that with a piece of steel. So I've had to put my earmuffs on. It's coming down. I'll do it a bit more, then I'll use the sanding pad to see whether I've got any highs and lows. So at this stage I'll just keep hitting it. I won't record that because the sound is just horrendous, and so I'll just turn this off and I'll show you when I've done a bit more. I've actually got to the stage where I can't feel too much of the ridge. There's a little bit there, not much. I'll finish that off just with a little bit of fine tapping. But what I've also found is that where this ridge is, this is actually a weld line. Now it goes right across the roof. This roof line is welded to the front section along this point. It's a very neat weld, but nevertheless a weld line. Now I've looked at one of my spares cars. I can't see the weld line in a later model. Now whether this is the way they constructed them in the early parts, I'm not too sure. Was it an old repair? Maybe, although I can't imagine why they would cut the front of the car, the body off, and weld a new front on in the time that this was on the road. It'd be extremely unlikely. So I don't know, but it is a weld, and I can see it more from underneath. Very good weld, but nevertheless a weld. So it's actually bent up a little bit on the weld line, and I can get that back down. There's no damage to the weld at all. It's quite solid. What I'll do is make sure when I've recurved all this, I'll put the window frame back in to make sure it hasn't altered the way the window sits, and I'll go from there. But at this stage, just a little bit of fine tapping, and I've just got to clean all this metal up. It's still got a bit of paint on it, and I should be ready to start the long painting process. Now I mentioned that the crease in the roof was caused by pushing up on the weld. Well, there's the weld line. You can see it right across the front of the car. This is from inside. It's a lot easier to see it, but definitely this the roof line has been welded right across the car to the front. And it does go right over into the corner. I can feel the weld into there. I thought maybe it was also lined up with the original sunroof on the earlier models, but I can't see any other welds at this stage anyway. So that's the weld line underneath the car.